Cyber Threat Brief for July 3, 2026. Anubis ransomware exploits Citrix Bleed 2 with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, mandated July 11 deadline. 40 Bleed credential harvesting fuels Inc. and links ransomware deployments across 12 confirmed victims. SharePoint on-prem remote code execution added to KEV, known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, despite Microsoft rating it less likely to exploit. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Cybersecurity Brief, July 3, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. Citrix Bleed 2 exploited in Anubis ransomware campaigns. CVE 2025-5777. Arctic Wolf observed Anubis ransomware, affiliates actively exploiting CVE 2025-5777. A critical authentication bypass in Citrix NetScaler ADC and gateway appliances configured as gateway or AAA virtual servers. The vulnerability carries a CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, score of 9. 3. EPSS, the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, score of 0. 999, 100th percentile, and appears on CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known exploited vulnerabilities catalog with a mandatory remediation deadline of July 11, 2025. Attackers combine the exploit with compromised VPN credentials obtained through initial access brokers, credential stuffing, or information stealers. Post-exploitation tradecraft includes deployment of legitimate RMM, remote monitoring and management, tools, Screen Connect, Zoho Assist, Mesh Agent, remotely, Ultra VNC, total software deployment for persistent access, PS exec for lateral movement, and Cloudflare Tunnel for command and control. Data exfiltration occurs via S3 browser, rclone, S5CMD, WinSCP, and POO-TTY before ransomware deployment. Anubis claimed 91 total victims with 11 in June 2026 alone, targeting healthcare, business services, manufacturing, technology, and financial services sectors. The operation advertises an 80% affiliate profit split and includes a /wipe mode feature that reduces files to 0 kilobytes regardless of ransom payment. Action: patch NetScaler ADC and gateway appliances before July 11. Review VPN authentication logs for access from hosting ASNs as 20,473, as 55,286. Hunt for RMM tool deployments, Screen Connect, Zoho Assist, Mesh Agent, remotely, Ultra VNC, PS exec service creation, Cloudflare Tunnel, Cloudflared artifacts, and cloud transfer utilities. Check for Windows Defender disablement, Sopho's uninstall activity, PC Hunter usage, and log manipulation. This is ransomware-linked active exploitation with a federal compliance deadline. Sources: The Hacker News. 40 Bleed feeds Ransomware Operations Inc. Links: SOC Radar confirmed the 40 Bleed initial access broker operation is directly supplying compromised Fortinet environments to Inc. Ransom and Links ransomware gangs. The campaign installed a Galling-based sniffer on approximately 12,000 FortiGate firewalls to harvest credentials from 430,000 targeted devices globally. An operational security lapse exposed internal tracking documents showing 409 admin-level compromises, 354 full attack chains, VPN compromise, domain controller access, domain admin privileges, and at least 12 confirmed ransomware deployments with hundreds of encrypted endpoints. Researchers observed a single operator logged into both Inc. and Link's ransom negotiation panels using infrastructure traceable to 40 Bleed. The IAB group consists of approximately 20 individuals and is actively exploiting a possible Nextcloud zero-day vulnerability in addition to the FortiGate credential harvesting. Action: audit FortiGate firewall configurations for unauthorized VPN credential use and unexpected administrative access. Review domain controller access logs for unusual authentication patterns from ASNs associated with hosting providers. Search for evidence of credential theft, data exfiltration, and access to Active Directory. Organizations running Nextcloud should monitor for exploitation attempts pending disclosure of the suspected zero-day. The access broker model means compromised credentials may not result in immediate ransomware deployment, creating a window where the breach remains undetected while attackers profile the environment. Sources: Dark Reading Security Week. SharePoint on-premises remote code execution added to CISA KEV, known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. CISA added an on-premises SharePoint remote code execution vulnerability to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, despite Microsoft's original assessment rating exploitation as less likely. The vulnerability is currently under active zero-day attack. Microsoft's patches have reportedly failed to fully remediate the issue in on-premises deployments. Action: Apply all available SharePoint updates immediately. Monitor for unusual SharePoint server activity, unexpected code execution, and unauthorized administrative actions. Restrict network access to SharePoint management interfaces. Federal agencies and organizations following CIS guidance must remediate per BOD 22.1 timelines. The discrepancy between Microsoft's assessment and real-world exploitation underscores the importance of treating all SharePoint vulnerabilities as high priority regardless of vendor severity ratings. Sources: The Register. Next section, Ransomware and Extortion. Interpol impersonation campaign targets small business. Bitdefender identified a ransomware campaign targeting small businesses across the US, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East using fake Interpol notices. Phishing emails claim the recipient organization is under investigation and direct victims to download a password-protected archive from Proton Drive, purportedly containing video evidence of criminal activity. The archive delivers a rudimentary custom ransomware payload disguised as a video file. Once executed, the malware encrypts local systems and instructs victims to contact attackers via the Talks peer-to-peer messaging platform for ransom negotiation. Unlike traditional ransomware operations, the campaign does not include a fixed ransom demand. Attackers tailor the amount after victims make contact, sizing the demand based on the organization's perceived ability to pay. Targeted sectors include pharmaceuticals, food, agriculture, technology, media, and legal services. Action: train employees to recognize phishing emails impersonating law enforcement. Block file downloads from Proton Drive if not required for business operations. Monitor for Talks client installations. The campaign's effectiveness relies on basic social engineering rather than sophisticated malware, demonstrating that small businesses remain attractive targets regardless of their cybersecurity posture. According to CrowdStrike, 29% of SMBs with fewer than 25 employees have been hit by ransomware, with 2/3 citing budget constraints as the primary barrier to security improvements. Sources: Dark Reading. Next section, Business and Infrastructure Threats. AI agent conducts end-to-end ransomware attack. Researchers documented what they characterize as the first fully autonomous AI-driven ransomware attack, in which an AI agent executed the complete attack chain from initial access through ransomware deployment without human intervention. The development represents a significant shift in threat actor capabilities, allowing less technically skilled operators to conduct sophisticated attacks using AI-powered tooling. Action: traditional detection and prevention controls remain effective against AI-driven attacks, as the underlying techniques, credential theft, lateral movement, data exfiltration, encryption, have not fundamentally changed. Focus on behavioral detection, privilege segmentation, and rapid response rather than attempting to distinguish between human and AI-operated intrusions. The automation primarily lowers the skill barrier for attackers rather than introducing novel attack vectors. Source: The Register. Google disrupts NetNut residential proxy network. Google, in coordination with the FBI and Lumen, disabled Google accounts and services used by the NetNut POPA residential proxy network for malware command and control. Google Threat Intelligence Group estimates the NetNut network controlled at least 2 million devices globally, populated through distribution of SDKs embedded in smart TVs, streaming boxes, and large-scale botnets such as Badbox 2.0. The disruption disabled millions of devices in the proxy pool. NetNut operates a white-label reseller program, meaning many residential proxy brands are fronts for the NetNut botnet. Google Play Protect now automatically warns users and disables applications incorporating NetNut SDKs. Residential proxy networks allow attackers to route malicious traffic through hijacked home IP addresses, masking their activity behind legitimate ISP allocations. Device owners are unaware their IP addresses are being used for unauthorized activities, creating liability and security risks. Action: review network traffic logs for connections to known residential proxy infrastructure. Organizations using residential proxies for legitimate testing should audit vendor sourcing to ensure they are not inadvertently supporting botnet operators. Home users should verify that smart TVs and streaming devices only run manufacturer-approved firmware and avoid sideloaded applications from untrusted sources. The disruption of Apidia in January 2026 demonstrated that proxy operators adapt by purchasing capacity from competitors, so sustained enforcement requires targeting multiple interconnected networks. Source: Google Threat Intelligence. SIEM data volume becomes liability. Vendor Employer Solutions reduced SIEM ingestion costs by 83% and improved detection capabilities by filtering high-volume, low-value telemetry before ingestion. The company's SIEM costs nearly tripled over 2 years as acquisitions and infrastructure growth generated unsustainable log volumes. Using machine learning and large language models in the security data pipeline, vendor automated filtering of firewall connection logs and other routine events while preserving threat, intrusion, and authentication alerts. The approach saved approximately $250,000 annually, while improving analyst efficiency by removing noise that obscured genuine security events. Side-by-side validation using native firewall metrics, historical data, and simulated attack traffic confirmed that filtered logs did not result in detection gaps. Action: audit SIEM ingestion policies to identify high-volume, low-value log sources. Prioritize telemetry that supports detection and response over data retained, just in case. Firewall connection logs allow rules, DNS query logs for benign domains, and routine system events are common candidates for filtering. Validate any changes by comparing detection coverage before and after filtering, using frameworks like MITRE ATT and CK-ATT and CK to ensure threat context is preserved. The financial and operational benefits of selective ingestion are significant, but the approach requires rigorous testing to avoid introducing blind spots. Source: dark reading. Next section, patch priority. Citrix NetScaler ADC/Gateway, CVE 2025-5777, CVSS 9.3, Authentication Bypass, CISA mandated July 11 deadline. On-premises SharePoint, RCE vulnerability under active zero-day exploitation, apply all available updates. Cursor AI-IDE, CVE 2026-50548, CVE 2026-50549, CVSS 9.8, Sandbox escape leading to OS-level RCE, patch to version 3.0+. ST Engineering iDirect IQ Series terminals, CVE 2026-38059, CVE 2026-38057 unauthenticated API, access and CSRF, update to 4.5.2, 2+. Microsoft Edge, CVE 2026-50521 RCE, update to latest version. Next section, vulnerability disclosures. Cursor AI IDE Sandbox Escape, CVE 2026-50548, CVE 2026-50549. Cato Networks disclosed two critical vulnerabilities, CVSS 9.8, in the Cursor AI code editor allowing remote code execution outside the IDE's sandbox. The flaws, collectively named Doonslide, abuse automatic terminal command execution that does not prompt for user approval. CVE 2026-50548 exploits the sandbox's path validation logic by injecting a prompt that sets the working directory to an attacker-supplied path outside the project scope, allowing overwrite of the Cursor sandbox executable. CVE 2026-50549 uses symbolic links to bypass out-of-bounds write protections, exploiting a path canonicalization flaw that causes Cursor to use the symlink path rather than the resolved target path. Both vulnerabilities are triggered when a victim prompts the IDE to ingest attacker-controlled content. Patches were included in Cursor 3.0, released April 2, 2026. Action: update Cursor to version 3.0 or later. Review project directories for unexpected symlinks and verify the Cursor sandbox executable has not been replaced. The vulnerabilities require the user to ingest attacker-controlled input, malicious repository, crafted prompt. So standard supply chain hygiene, reviewing code before opening projects, avoiding untrusted repositories provides defense in depth. Source: Security Week. Mac OS PAM Stealer uses PAM validation. Jamf Threat Labs identified PAM Stealer, a Mac OS information stealer distributed as a compiled Apple script impersonating Mackie, a legitimate clipboard manager. The malware is delivered via a lookalike domain, mackyapp.com, and uses a two-stage infection, an Apple script dropper that fingerprints the host and downloads a Rust-based payload. The stealer harvests data from web browsers, cryptocurrency wallets, iCloud keychain, and clipboard content. It prompts the victim for their system password and validates it using the Mac OS pluggable authentication modules, PAM, API, looping until the correct password is entered. The malware establishes persistence, exfiltrates encrypted data to a vendor-sync.live, and displays a fake gatekeeper error message claiming the app is damaged. The Apple script dropper includes anti-analysis checks, terminating execution on Intel Macs in sandboxed environments or on systems with time zones, locales, or keyboards associated with Eastern European countries. Action: block mackyapp.com and 2 additional domains. See show notes for the full list. Source: The Hacker News. FATFS file system vulnerabilities. 7 CVEs, Run 0 disclosed 7 unpatched vulnerabilities in the FAT-FS file system driver, affecting industrial gear and smart devices globally. The bugs allow an attacker to use a crafted file system image to cause memory corruption and execute malicious code. Exploitation requires physical access to insert removable media with the corrupted image, but over-the-air exploitation is possible in scenarios where firmware update channels automatically mount the malicious image. FAT-FS is widely used in real-time operating system, RTOS, environments due to its Windows FAT compatibility and royalty-free, open-source licensing. All FAT-FS versions ever released are vulnerable. The project has no CVE or common vulnerabilities and exposures, history, security mailing list, or patch notification mechanism, meaning downstream vendors must independently discover, triage, and patch the vulnerabilities. Run 0 expects remediation to span years rather than days, with tens of millions of devices affected across dozens of codebases. Action: identify devices using FAT-FS for file system operations and monitor vendor advisories for patches. Implement physical access controls for removable media ports. Review firmware update processes to ensure OTA images are cryptographically signed and validated before mounting. The lack of centralized patching infrastructure means this will be a long-tail remediation effort, with many devices never receiving updates. Source: Risky Biz News. ST Engineering iDirect IQ Series Terminals. CVE 2026-38059. CVE 2026-38057. CIS published an advisory for 2 vulnerabilities in ST Engineering iDirect IQ Series satellite terminals affecting Evolution IQ Series 3315 series, and 9 series models running firmware versions 4.5.2.1 and earlier. CVE 2026-38059 exposes /API/identity and /API/REST API endpoints without authentication, allowing retrieval of sensitive device information including serial number, device ID DID, Terminal Private Key Identifier, TPK, MAC address, and firmware version. The DID and TPK are used for satellite network authentication and could enable terminal impersonation and network reconnaissance. CVE 2026-38057 is a CSRF vulnerability in the /API/reboot endpoint that allows an attacker to host a malicious web page, triggering an unauthenticated device reboot and satellite link loss when visited by an authenticated administrator. Repeated exploitation can sustain denial of service. ST Engineering iDirect fixed both issues in firmware version 4.5.2.2. Action: update IQ series terminals to firmware 4.5.2.2 or later. Restrict management interfaces to trusted networks, VPN, ACL, and avoid exposing administrative APIs to the public internet. Monitor for anomalous API activity and unexpected device reboots. The vulnerabilities affect critical infrastructure sectors including communications, defense, energy, government, and transportation. Source: CISICS, Industrial Control Systems Advisory. Garden EOT Hub, CVE 2026-13768, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. CIS disclosed 3 vulnerabilities in the Garden EOT Hub affecting home and studio smart gardening devices. CVE 2026-13768 exposes a hard-coded privileged IATHUBONER key that allows a malicious user to invoke EOT Hub Registry Manager functions, returning connection information for all garden devices and enabling arbitrary command execution on connected devices. The key also provides a potential pivot point to other devices on the victim's network. Makes the Azure Blob Storage container used for device logs publicly listable without authentication, exposing device log files. Is the absence of standard security headers on the admin panel, enabling clickjacking and cross-site scripting attacks. Garden deployed infrastructure updates to fix the vulnerabilities and released firmware version master 627. Devices with internet connectivity will automatically download the update, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: ensure Garden devices have internet connectivity to receive automatic firmware updates. Verify devices are running firmware version master 627 or later via the Garden mobile app. Update the Garden mobile app to the latest version. The vulnerabilities demonstrate the security risks inherent in EOT devices with cloud-managed infrastructure and highlight the importance of automatic update mechanisms for consumer-grade smart devices. Source: CISA Advisory. Additional Microsoft CVE publications. Microsoft published advisories for multiple CVEs with minimal technical detail. Notable entries include CVE 2026-14164, libarchive double free and RAR5 decompression, Edge RCE, DHCPCD infinite loop, and several Linux kernel KSMBD vulnerabilities. EPSS scores range from 0.2 to 0.8, indicating low predicted exploitation likelihood at this time, and 5 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action. Apply updates as they become available through normal patch management processes. The sparse advisory content suggests these are informational publications rather than high-priority vulnerabilities requiring immediate action. Sources: MSRC Security Update Guide and related CVE pages. Next section, General Security News. Claude Cowork Sandbox Root Escape Armadin disclosed an attack chain affecting Claude Cowork on Windows that allows an attacker with local code execution to escalate privileges to root in the Cowork sandbox and bypass network egress restrictions. The exploit plants a malicious file in Claude Desktop's application directory, hijacking a trusted process to communicate with the underlying VM service. 2 unvalidated parameters in the service interface enable command execution as root and circumvention of network filtering, allowing exfiltration to attacker-controlled infrastructure. Anthropic responded that it does not consider this a security issue, because exploitation requires pre-existing local code execution on the host. Action. The vulnerability requires an attacker to already have code execution on the local system, meaning traditional endpoint protection, patching, EDR, least privilege, remains the primary defense. Organizations using Claude Cowork should ensure endpoint security controls are functioning and limit local administrative access. Anthropic's position is consistent with industry-standard threat models that treat local code execution as a security boundary. Source: The Hacker News. Apple Hide My Email vulnerability researcher Tyler Murphy disclosed an unpatched vulnerability in Apple's Hide My Email service that allows users' real email addresses to be unmasked. Murphy reported the issue to Apple over a year ago, and it remains unfixed. In limited testing with volunteers, 100% of Hide My Email addresses were exploitable. Exact technical details are being withheld to prevent further exploitation. Action. Users relying on Hide My Email for privacy should be aware that the service may not provide the anonymity it promises. Until Apple patches the vulnerability, consider using alternative email aliasing services for high-privacy contexts. The year-long delay between disclosure and patching is concerning and inconsistent with Apple's typical response times for privacy-impacting issues. Source: The Hacker News. Beep RAT distributed via Chinese utility rubric Zero Labs identified Beep RAT, a customized version of the open-source DC RAT framework distributed via a Chinese phone number management utility. The malware is packaged as a NET application, HFY, EXE, alongside legitimate-appearing database libraries. Analysis revealed a multi-stage infection chain deploying the Beep RAT payload, which establishes persistence via scheduled tasks and resolves command and control infrastructure using DNS over HTTPS, DUH. The malware beacons host information and opens a persistent communication channel for file transfers, command prompt sessions, PowerShell execution, and process/storage enumeration. Action. Monitor for unexpected scheduled task creation, DUH query patterns to unusual resolvers, and network connections to known DC RAT infrastructure. The use of legitimate database libraries as cover demonstrates the continued effectiveness of Trojanized utilities as initial access vectors, particularly in targeted regional campaigns. Source: The Hacker News. Next section, Trends and Context. Today's stories cluster around 3 themes. First, the commoditization of ransomware infrastructure through access broker operations. 40 Bleed, Anubis, creates a separation between initial compromise and final payload deployment, complicating attribution and extending dwell time. Second, CISA's addition of SharePoint RCE to the KEV catalog, despite Microsoft's less likely exploitation assessment, demonstrates the widening gap between vendor severity ratings and real-world threat activity. Third, the disclosure of long-lived vulnerabilities in widely deployed open-source components. FATFS, libarchive, with no centralized patching mechanism, highlights the ongoing challenge of securing the embedded and EOT device ecosystem. That concludes today's Cyber Threat Brief. From Carolina Clear Tech, stay patched, stay vigilant.